The second trend we need to talk a bit about, and the shift that this may cause, is the political landscape. It seems, Dr. Keel, anytime there's this shift in power in Washington, especially now as we kind of look at this year, right, both houses of Congress and now the executive branch are going to be held by the same political party. How do you think this shift or change in the political landscape is going to affect, especially manufacturing and distribution in 2021? I got to imagine that there's probably going to be a significant level of impact.
Yeah, there definitely will be. But one of the more interesting developments, because of the close nature of the Senate now, is that for the first time probably in 10, 15 years, we have a center that is going to have an extraordinary amount of power. Because you've got a dead tie, 50-50, it suddenly puts the sort of a handful of liberal Republicans and a handful of conservative Democrats in a very powerful position, because nothing is really going to happen without their support. So you're going to be looking at an expanded attention being focused on people like Mitt Romney and Ben Sass and Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins, kind of the moderate middle in the Republican side. On the Democratic side, you're going to be looking at more influence for people like John Tester and Kirsten Sinema and Joe Manchin. Those people together now hold the balance, and it's going to sort of temper both parties in a sense of what they try to accomplish. The biggest changes, I think, politically are likely to be trade-related. We were certainly going to see changes in regulatory authority. We're going to see changes in taxes. How much change is going to depend, again, on that center. But when it comes to trade, we're probably going to see a lot more activity with Europe. We're probably going to see a little bit more activity with Canada. Mexico, it's hard to tell because the government there is not very stable and the country is in bad economic shape. China is probably not going to change much at all. The democratic attitude towards China has always been pretty hostile. They have always been upset with human rights policies, their labor policies, their environmental policies. So it's not likely that there's going to be a boost in U.S.-China relations. If anything, it could get worse. And that goes back to the supply chain issue. We're going to be looking at more alternatives other than China. So I think we're early days. We don't yet really know what the Biden policies are going to be. They're saying all the right things when it comes to worrying about the labor supply and worrying about American competitiveness. And even when it comes to trade, his trade representative made it clear that the focus is going to be on U.S. jobs, kind of going after trade differently than we have in the past, saying we're not as interested in stopping imports as we are in expanding exports. So it's going to be the message of, if you want the U.S. to buy from you, you had better buy from us, or we're not going to do business with you. And that's kind of the German approach. I mean, that's what Angela Merkel has done for years, and it looks like we may start to try to copy that.
Interesting. Any guess on what might be Biden's kind of overarching tariff policy? Obviously, under Trump, we saw quite an emphasis on tariffs. Any guesstimate on what we might expect to see from Biden by chance?
We will probably see a little less emphasis on tariffs, because when it comes right down to it, the tariff is a tax on the American company and the American consumer. I mean, the idea behind a tariff is simple, sort of, which is simply to make the import more expensive so that people will buy the domestically made product. Where it falls apart is when you don't really have a domestic alternative and you still have to buy the import, but now it's more expensive, which you then pass on to your consumer. The idea of emphasizing exports is basically saying, look, we're not going to tax ourselves to try to control our trade deficit. What we are going to demand is we have the market that the entire world wants access to. We are the consumers par excellence. We have leverage. If you want access to the U.S., well, then cooperate. If you don't want to cooperate, then don't be surprised if you don't have a lot of access. I think we will hold countries' feet to the fire when it comes to trying to engage in dumping. You've already heard from the government that we're going to take a very dim view of currency manipulation. Janet Yellen, her very first speech was basically saying we are not going to tolerate currency manipulation, and we have lots of tools to punish countries like China if they try things like that. But I think the focus is going to be a little bit more on You want access to us. To get that access, you need to cooperate.